Ferrari, synonymous with speed and beauty. It all began in the 1940s when Enzo Ferrari designed the first car to bear his name. With its 2-liter Colombo-designed V12 stuffed in front, this 166 Spider Corsa was the first Ferrari ever. It has undergone many alterations and transformations since its birth in 1947. Let's discuss a bit of its history with its current owner.
This car started life in 1947 as the Ferrari Works Grand Prix car. They built 3 cars in 47 only. This particular car was then used by Sommer in the Touring Grand Prix, which he won with this car. It then went through, it came back to the factory, was rebodied, and then sold to Gabriele Pisana, an Italian nobleman. And as such was also the very first Ferrari ever sold. From there he raced it in Italy, on the continent, and then down in South America. It was subsequently sold, and then I assume it came to the States somewhere in the early 50s. From then it was rebodied and was allowed to run itself right down into the ground. I guess the motor stopped and it just got dirty and ugly. And at that stage Stanley Nowak bought the car and subsequently sold it on to Anthony Bamford in England, who's a notable Ferrari collector.
Cohen and Zunkel took delivery of the car from Bamford with only shreds of the original coachwork intact. Working from photographs and drawings, they painstakingly recrafted the body section by section. It took 3 years.
The actual serial number is 002C, and the legend is that the Italians were superstitious about odd numbers being the numbers of racing cars. So when this came out with the Ferrari badge on it, the first one to carry the badge, why, it was designated 002C.
Authenticity is the name of the game in restoration, especially if it's the first Ferrari ever produced. Luigi Canetti, the man responsible for many of Ferrari's early racing victories, reflects on the restoration of one of the cars he knew so well.
The owner of those cars is, for sure, is a lover of this. For me, it's like a piece of art, like a nice painting. I see a 166. I love this car very, very much because I want to make some world record in 1947 and 48.
The early 50s saw the Mercedes 300 SL and then the D-Type Jaguar become a major force in European racing. In 1958, Ferrari was back in control with their very successful 250 series. They were produced in both short and long wheelbase versions. The 50s and 60s saw Ferrari as the world's top manufacturer of specialized GT automobiles. From 1955 to 1959, the 250 GT long wheelbase Ferraris dominated their classes in European racing. During those years, the Ferrari won the Tour de France every single year. In October of 1959, Ferrari ushered in a new Berlinetta design. The car was known as the 250 SWB for short wheelbase. With the drivetrain and chassis based on previous 250 models, the car sported a new Pininfarina design and was destined for both road and track use. Scaglietti remained the body builder, and the car was available in two configurations, competition and street. Throughout its 3-year production run, 175 250 SWB models were constructed. Most had steel bodies with aluminum doors and lids. An all-aluminum version, as seen here, was also produced. The competition version also included plexiglass side and rear windows and aluminum trim, including aluminum bumpers. In its initial outings, the car ran in the sports car categories because it was not immediately homologated by the FIA as a GT car. But because of its superb performance, SWB models finished 4th, 6th, and 7th overall in their first race at the 1960 12 Hours of Sebring. Homologation papers were finally signed prior to Le Mans in June of 1960. And you know, you had to like Ferrari's chances at Le Mans. Not only was the car dominating the racing scene, but the team drivers were scattering the competition badly with the Testarossas at that time. The results were not too surprising at Le Mans that year. Ferraris took 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th overall, with the 250 SWB following the 1st and 2nd place Testarossas in the 4th slot. For the 6th consecutive year, Ferrari also swept the Tour de France, with SWBs taking the first 3 places in that prestigious event. To maintain reliability in his cars, Ferrari did not like to make wholesale design changes. The Colombo-designed V12 had worked well before and would work well again in the 250 series. We talked with owner Ed Swart about this much sought-after classic.
It was built in 1960, and it was owned by a Portuguese driver who became Portuguese champion in it in several hill climbs and races he did. And he raced it for about 3 years, and then the car went into a museum. Museum of Dr. de la Cerda in Portugal also, and he had it in the museum until the early 70s, and then his son took it to England, and I bought it in 1975 in England.
In the United States, the 50 Santa Barbara and Riverside. October 1964 saw the introduction of a new generation of Ferrari, the 275 GTB. Still thought by many to be the most beautiful Ferrari ever, this new Berlinetta boasted Ferrari's first ever front-engine car with independent rear suspension. The new car was powered with a 3.3-liter version of the original Colombo-designed V12, bored out to 77 millimeters, but retaining the 59 millimeter stroke. The powerful single-cam engine displaced 3,285 cc's with a compression ratio of 9.2 to 1. 280 horsepower was reached at 7,500 RPM. The first short-nosed versions featured a blunt snout with a large radiator opening, which caused some front-end lift at high speeds. This was later rectified in the long-nose version. A long sloping hood with faired-in transparent plastic headlamp covers highlighted just one of the new design features incorporated into the GTB. The wraparound windshield had an extreme rake and was similar in shape to that used on the GTO 64 and 250 LM cars. 3 dual-throat Weber carburetors provided proper fuel mixtures, and the V12 boasted 2 distributors and 2 oil filters. The distributors were powered off of the end of each camshaft atop each head. The cylinder heads were constructed of aluminum, as were the decidedly Ferrari valve covers. The 275 GTB, a strong carrier of the Ferrari flag of excellence, touted by many to be the best handling road and racing vehicle the boys from Maranello ever produced. As good as it was, the GTB was further improved with a very limited production run of cars known as the GTB-C. This is one of 11 GTB-Cs constructed in 1966 for racing in the FIA's Grand Touring category. An all-aluminum body was wrapped around a highly lightened chassis. The single overhead cam motor was boosted to racing specifications and was, in essence, the most successful 250 LM motor with 3 carburetors affixed. The engine was bolted directly to the frame, snubbing the comforts of the usual rubber engine mounts. This particular example remains as it was during its Le Mans outing in 1967. Owner Jim Wallace comments on some of the special features of this race car.
The side marker, the white lights, illuminate the number and aid the timing and scoring people to identify the cars that are going at night. The red and the blue lights on the side were the pit indicator lights. Each team had a different marking. Some teams had the lights on the top, some teams preferred them on the side, and it just helps the pit people know as their cars are coming down the pit lane to be prepared to refuel and change the tires, whatever the car needed at the pit stops. This car, is unique in the fact that it's the only one that was produced at the factory with the outside filler cap.
Chassis lightening techniques were used everywhere on the GTB-C. Dual fuel tanks answered the call during long-distance racing. They carried 37 gallons of racing gasoline. Right-hand drive assisted while maneuvering the clockwise configuration of European racetracks. 7 by 15-inch front and 7.5 by 15 rear Barani competition wheels completed the competitive edge. Let's sit back and relive an important slice of Ferrari racing history as we enjoy the sights and sounds of the 275 GTBC skirting the dips and turns of Mulholland. The 4-cam version of the 275 GTB was used only in the long-nose version. Boasting over 300 horsepower, the powerful engine was enough for most amateur cafe racers and highway travelers. The troublesome flexible drive shaft on earlier models was replaced in the later long-noses by a rigid torque tube encircling the drive shaft, thereby keeping vibration to a minimum. The front bumperettes were often removed by GTB owners as they offered little protection, and removal gave a more racy appearance to the cars. Performance of the GTB was excellent, with 60 miles per hour being reached in 6 seconds and 100 in 14 or 15 seconds. Top speed was in the neighborhood of 155. Approximately 200 examples of the 275 GTS were built in 1965, a convertible version of the GTB with a completely different body, but basically mechanically the same. Production of the 275 GTB and its open version, the 275 GTS, ended in 1968, and Ferrari was without a new streetcar until the unveiling of the Daytona 2 years later.
The mid-60s saw Ferrari in the thick of international racing. Porsche was not yet a contender in the large displacement classes, but Ford had a better idea and was determined to upset Ferrari, particularly at Le Mans. Typical Le Mans start saw the Fords and Ferraris engaging in their famous bump and run routine. Phil Hill's Chaparral gets a slow start.
From the beginning, it was clear Ford was the car to beat. The Gurney Foyt Mark IV not only was pumping out 500 horsepower, but was achieving an astounding 6.5 miles per gallon, almost the equal of the Ferrari P4s. This surprised the Ferrari team, as the P4s weighed nearly 500 pounds less than their American rivals. At midnight, an accident took out 3 of the Ford Mark IIs and 4s. But by the 18th hour, 5 of the 7 starting Ferraris were also gone, as was the chaparral of Hill and Spence. The prototypes are always exciting. Let's take a closer look at this 330 P34. The original P3 engine in its 4-liter form with twin ignition produced 420 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. But the updated P4 had a new power plant designed by Franco Rocci. It boasted 3 valves per cylinder and utilized Lucas fuel injection. With an 11-to-1 compression ratio, it produced 450 horsepower at 8,200 RPM. The life of the P-Series cars was short, as the FIA changed their minds in 1968 and restricted the maximum prototype engine displacement to 3 liters. This angered the Ferrari camp, who did not campaign a competitive prototype car until the 512's debut in 1970. The Ferrari Daytona, a Pininfarina design at its best. Not mistaken for any other Ferrari model. Big, fast, healthy, expensive. The Daytona went into production in 1968 as a replacement for the 275 GTB. Until the model was discontinued in 1974, it was the king of the road. Ferrari's aim with the Daytona was to keep the marque competitive with the likes of the Lamborghini Miura S. Designed from the beginning as a road car, it was introduced to the aficionados at the 1968 Paris Salon. Its crisp, clean lines mark the Daytona as a style leader with few peers even to this day. Capable of speeds over 170 miles per hour, its aerodynamic design was proved on the boulevards and streets of the world. The Daytona Coupe was an exciting and successful GT automobile, but it had a sister that enjoyed equal success, the Daytona Spider. The Daytona Spider quickly became one of the most sought-after Ferrari road cars. Originally a European car, this example has been converted to U.S. specifications, whereby the covered headlights raise up when in operation and are stowed when not in use, so as to retain the Daytona's clean lines. Function laced with beauty was the Spider's trademark. Comfortable vented bucket seats, integrated air conditioning, a 5-speed transmission. The heart of the Spider, like that of the Coupe, was the V12 power plant, shown here with the later air cleaner assembly and in left-hand drive configuration. The car was heavy at 3,600 pounds, but its 350 horsepower engine made up for any lack of agility, although the car did require a 40-foot turning circle. All Daytona models are still sought after to this day by vintage racers and collectors alike, and a Daytona owner is looked upon with some awe and respect as he motors his favorite toy to the corner store. Succeeding the Daytona in high performance was the Ferrari 512 BB, the Boxer. It is a rare sight on American roads since it was not an official factory import. Even more rare is the exotic 512 BBLM. With production limited to about 25 cars, the Le Mans version of the Boxer was exciting to look at, whether moving or stationary. It was not wildly successful on the racetrack, but is thoroughly enjoyed by private owners who can own a car similar to only 24 others in the world. It boasts a full complement of racing modifications not shared by the street version. To enjoy the LM in action, let's go along with a well-qualified driver. Phil Hill will comment on the course at Laguna Seca.
This is turn 2. This is turn 3 coming up now. Difficult, but lots of fun when you do it right. And here's the infamous turn that you go down to Salinas if you make a mistake in. Up here is the corkscrew. God damn it. Here we come down to turn 7. This is a difficult one. Probably the most difficult one on the whole circuit. Again. Come down into turn 2. Here we come up under the bridge again. This is where you go down to Salinas if you goof.
After years of frustration, 12-cylinder Ferrari enthusiasts finally got their wish in 1985. The Testarossa became available in legalized form in the United States. How well has it been accepted? We visited one of the busiest Ferrari dealers in the country to find out if the Testarossa will continue to be a part of the Ferrari legend and a smart purchase.
Car is really the first legal 12-cylinder that Ferrari has produced in a long, long time that can be imported in the United States without worrying about EPA and DOT requirements. And that in itself has made the car very, very popular. The other aspect of the Testarossa is that Ferrari is only going to bring 125 to 150 a year into the United States. And I can sell that many alone in Newport Beach. So car is a good investment.
The car is a good investment because Ferrari has made great strides toward making the car more livable in day-to-day use.
There's vast improvements over the older car. The big improvement I notice is the clutch. The clutch is easy to operate. A woman can drive the car without feeling any tension on the clutch. It's cool inside the car. When you compare that car with a Boxer, they've taken and modified the radiators and put them behind the driver so you don't have all that hot water running underneath the driver's compartment. It's quiet. It's easy to handle in traffic. There's on and on all day why that car would be valuable in years to come.
The Testarossa offers you the latest in engine technology, chassis design, and aerodynamics. Its 5-speed transmission allows you speed with comfort. It has a unique style and is expensive. All the requirements for a bona fide exotic.